Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly video roundtable discussion show where we discuss all things fire service related. Firefighting Today is a production of PeteLamb.com. And now your host, Chief Peter Lamb.
Welcome everyone. I appreciate you being with us tonight. We're going to talk, what does safety mean to your department? That's what we're doing tonight. That's what the plan is tonight. Couple of housekeeping items like we always do. If you are watching us live on YouTube, there is a live YouTube chat. So if you're on the YouTube channel, you can go to the live YouTube chat and touch base with us there. That's an important one. And we are also monitoring Twitter. So if you put something up on Twitter and you put the at Pete Lamb, we'll be able to pick that up and we can introduce your comment right to the board and right to the panel. So feel free to do that as well. So without further ado, let's introduce the panel for tonight. Chief Woolery, say hello to the group.
Good evening. My name is Lane Woolery. I'm a battalion chief with San Diego Fire Rescue.
Okay, Chief Cagno.
Chief John Cagno, retired out of North Providence, Rhode Island, founder of Lead It.
Chief Pernesti.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Pernesti. I'm an assistant chief at City of Elyria, Ohio Fire Department. Thanks for having me again, Chief.
Okay, and Chief Hall.
Hello, everyone. Charlie Hall, a retired chief fire officer here in West Warwick, Rhode Island.
All right, great. And just a quick shameless plug there for Chief Pernesti. He is on this week's Firefighter Training Podcast. So the podcast that was released this morning, Chief Pernesti's on there, and there's some good information for you to have and follow up with. So there's a lot of discussion about safety. Let me tell you how we got to tonight. There was some conversations with Lane last week. There was some text messages from Charlie, and we're going to kind of try to put our arms in general around safety, or what people are saying about safety, and what does it really mean in real life in your department? What does it really mean? Well, you know, it's a kind of a nebulous term. We hear all kinds of things. So I'm going to ask the panel, we're going to run some basic questions first, running down the panel, and then we can get some sense of where everybody is on that. So Lane, just from you, how do you, I assume you have safety officers in the department. Are they appointed? Do you train every battalion? How does a safety officer work in your world, Lane?
Well, we, for one, every battalion chief on our department is a, what would be a, I guess, a type 3 safety officer. In order to sit the battalion chief's test, you actually have to take the all hazard safety officer class. And we assign 2 battalion chiefs on every first alarm with the intent of, if that second due battalion chief isn't actually going to function or run a division or something like that, they will often be assigned as the safety officer for the incident.
Okay, good. So they are professionally trained. You send 2 on every job, and then obviously if everyone is a safety officer, you can pull. You have extras you could pull if you needed to, large commercial or something like that. Chief Cagno, how did it work in North Providence? How was safety officers determined? How'd you run with them on a first alarm? How did that work?
Well, we actually have an official title of training and safety officer. That's at the battalion chief level. All battalion chiefs are trained as safety officers. And then if we have a working fire, they usually do a callback chief, sort of what Lane's talking about, who will act as the safety officer if he's not doing an actual operation.
All right. Chief Pernesti, how does it work in your world?
Well, we have a position of training and safety officer, but it's all on duty shift commander to be the safety officer. I can count on my one hand the number of times we've actually put somebody in that position, unfortunately.
Right. So that person, let's just describe that person for a minute, Chief. So he's a daytime operational person. He's an administrative person, if you will.
Yeah, pretty much. And so if he's working during the day, he will come. But unfortunately, you maybe put him into other positions, or but at night it's a crapshoot, and it becomes too late into the incident. You need them earlier, and so just the way it works in my department, that the shift commander's got to do it all.
Well, that's the kind of candor we want, Chief. That's what we want to talk about tonight, because it's not, as you know, it's not a beautiful picture like everybody paints it to be. Charlie, how does it work on a first alarm in your world?
Well, we had a cadre of lieutenants and captains and deputy chiefs that were trained as safety officers through the National Fire Academy course. And I actually went to the trainer through NFA, and was the trainer for the department. And I had approximately 25 certified safety officers by the time it was done. And so we had at least several on duty during the course of each tour, and they would assume the role of safety officer until if it was a large incident, second alarm or greater, the training and safety officer would be recalled and would respond to the scene and take over the duties of the safety officer. But one of the certified people would take the reins until the arrival of the training and safety officer.
Yeah, and that kind of talks, and I don't think that's unusual, but that kind of speaks to what Chief Pernesti was saying in terms of it's not Johnny on the spot. I mean, you don't get him early on in the fire, and we can figure out that that things go wrong early on for sure. We've got a bunch of people. I lost my chat room. I got a little computer restart going on here. It must be the thing for tonight. So I lost the chat room temporarily. I will try to pick that back up for you. But as I do that, what does the safety problem look like in your department, Lane? So not in terms of line of duty deaths, but what are you seeing for injuries in your department? How is that working?
You know, we're pretty much like everybody else. It's, you know, heat and physical exhaustion type injuries, trip, fall, cuts, that sort of stuff. You know, just to be honest, probably just the standard firefighting cost of doing business kind of things that I think every agency has, you know, day in, day out. You know, we've had we get the burns from time to time, and we did have some crazed face pieces. We had a little problem with that here a few years ago. And, oh, got a first alarm coming in, guys, so I'm going to have to bow out.
Okay, just just mute your mic for me, Lane, and join us when you can. So, speaking of safety issues, off he goes. So, John, what kind of injuries were you seeing in your department? What were you seeing as issues in your world?
I'd have to kind of chime into what Lane was saying, the typical things. I think our biggest problem would be related to being overworked. Not enough personnel on the scene in the initial phase of the operation, so guys overextend themselves. And then they work the whole fire, so then during the overhaul stage, you usually get a lot of trip and falls. Guys are getting tired; they're not paying attention. They're fatigued. That's when you usually see the common fall hazard and things like that. So minor in nature. We haven't had any major or significant injuries over, let's say, like the last 10 or 15 years, thankfully. But usually work related, and usually because we don't have the manpower.
All right. Well, that's an interesting question, because manpower we could have that discussion all night long, whether it's on the on-call side or the career side. Manpower is always an issue. Whose fault is that?
Well, even when you call in, companies early, for that first 10 or 15 minutes, guys are really going at it. It's just that you don't have enough manpower per company on arrival initially. So guys are doing the work of 2 or 3 people sometimes. I mean, even raising a large ground ladder in the rear of a building, it can be taxing in a community like mine because, you know, they're going over fences and, you know, down narrow hallways, alleyways or whatever. So by the time they get there, you know, they're pretty beat up. Now they got to raise a heavy ground ladder. You know, that's where you see the sprains and strains.
Okay, but I'm going to reiterate, whose fault is that? Is that the incident commander that's overworking his troops?
Probably, but again, unless we had more people per company, that's going to happen.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Chief Pernesti, what are you seeing for issues in your world?
The same thing with, you know, the sprains and strains, but the one item that I remember that you're talking about leadership is about 5 years ago, we had two downtown basement fires within hours of each other. And in the first basement fire, an old like light ballast type frame was above a false ceiling, fell, and pretty severely injured the neck of a firefighter. So after all the excitement of two good basement fires, instead of talking about the voids and problems of these kind of buildings, we pointed fingers as why he was, you know, what happened. His officer did this, his officer did that. He should have called a mayday. He should blah, blah, blah. And nobody learned that this is a very common issue in our buildings of things hidden and voids and reconfigurations and refurbishment. And it was a bad situation. He ended up retiring not too long after that, but we never learned. We just pointed fingers at each other, and the bottom line was this could happen again, and we didn't spread that. That bothered me.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's uncommon. We'll talk a little bit about how things get reported and how things get investigated, which is a great segue to what you just went to. Charlie, types of injuries that you were seeing on with some kind of basis.
I'm going to echo what the rest of the panel actually has already said. The sprains and strains, the heat exhaustion is a big thing now as far as we go, especially this time of year, summertime, so forth, with the advent of the greater envelope of protective gear. There's a negative side to that, and it doesn't allow your body heat to escape the way us old timers used to have with the fold down boots. And I'm not saying they were better. I'm not saying they weren't, but I have seen quite an increase in the heat exhaustion, heat related injuries, the cardiac and respiratory type problems that go along with it. And again, to jump on what Chief Cagno said, staffing, huge issue. And I don't think it's the incident commander's fault. The incident commander doesn't do the hiring. The incident commander doesn't mandate what the staffing is per piece or per shift. That's by contract, and that's the cities and towns don't have a great understanding of what it is that we do. It's just that we cost them money. You want a quality product, it's going to cost you money. To have a quality product, your apparatus has to be properly staffed. You want to cut down injuries, properly staff your apparatus. And I'll get off the soapbox now.
No, Charlie, this is the kind of discussion that I want to have. I guess my question is, all right, the city hall is a problem and the mayor is a problem or whoever is a problem. I got that. Now, that being said, if I'm in the front yard and I send two guys to throw a 35, I'm sending two guys to lift a 600-pound ladder or something. That's my decision.
And if that's all you have, all the IC can do, having all of us having been in that position, we know you can only work with or use what you have at your disposal. You can't create, and now the cities and towns try to do addition by subtraction. They close a company and up the staffing on the neighboring companies on either side. Well, what good does that do to the district that the company's been closed in? The addition by subtraction thing, I mean. The companies have to be staffed up, whether it be career, call, or volunteer. You've got to roll out the door with the proper complement of firefighters in order to do the job as effectively and safely as possible. There is no such thing, gentlemen, as safe firefighting. That's an oxymoron. Can firefighting be made safer? It certainly can. And one of the premier things to do to accomplish that is to have proper staffing.
Okay. So staffing correlates to safety. Okay, that's one of the takeaways that we got from tonight. A couple of folks in the chat room. Hello to Christine. Christine is with us. Thank you for looking forward to the discussion. And Ethan is with us. And Ethan said, "Great podcast with Chief Pernesti today." So Joe, you can write him a check a little later on for that, for the nice comments. You know what I mean? So
I will. My fan.
All right. So how many, all right. This is a question that has always intrigued me. Do you have injuries at every run? And with your answer on this one, how do they get reported? I believe, this is Pete's soapbox for a minute. I believe that there are more injuries than we say there are, because I think that the firefighters, in some cases, there are firefighters that will report a hangnail, and there are firefighters that will not report that they hurt themselves pretty good, and will just kind of walk it off, limp it off, or whatever. So were you having, was it every 5 fires, every fire? Kind of talk about that for a minute, and I'll run the panel again. Chief Cagno.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. You're absolutely right. We have people that, they'll report every little thing to protect themselves sometimes, or sometimes because they need some time off, to be honest with you. And I know that won't go over big, but that's the truth. And then you have guys that, they're supposed to check into rehab, and they're going in one door, rescuing out the other. And it's only because they want to get back in and do it.
Okay. Chief Pernesti, what's that look like with you? Is it every fire, every other fire? Is it, what do you think? Do we have people not reporting in some cases?
I think you have a generation now of firefighters that are going to report everything, or, every little injury. And I think some of that's good in the fact that, and I even tell guys, you never know what's going to happen in the future. So we document a lot now than what we used to, as far as, do we call them an injury? I don't know about that. We may call them exposures a lot of times, but I think we do it now more than ever. One other thing, though, one thing that bothers me, and I think it's a matter of pacing yourself on the fire ground. We've lost that in the fire service. I get frustrated when I see guys come out of a building. I'm not just talking in my city, I'm talking a lot of cities, and they look at you like they're done. And I'm thinking, how can guys who are in such great shape, and these are guys that are in good shape, runners, weightlifters, and so on, all over the country again, and I got to rehab. The building is still on fire. Come on, we got work to do. And that gets me a little bit. Maybe that's just because I'm old, but I can't stand that. And I'm being candid. I can't stand it when people are standing around after one cylinder and there's still fire that needs to be taken care of in a.
All right, Charlie, your thoughts? Is it every other fire? Is everything getting reported? What are your thoughts on where we're going now?
To pin it on every other fire, every third fire, I think, at least in my experience, would be virtually impossible. But a lot of it depended upon the severity of the incident. And I did pride myself being aggressive. I had aggressive crews and an aggressive department. And that does take its toll. Is everything reported? Absolutely not. And it would be for a variety of reasons. Was it something that happened because of something that was incorrect during the size up, or someone sized up something incorrectly in their own situation? As we all know, the size up takes place upon arrival. Sure, it does, but each individual is responsible for size up through every phase of the fire, sizing up their own situation and the dangers and so forth that they're putting themselves in. And we all know it's a risky business. All of that said, is it all reported? I think not. I know the department, in my department, it would be, if something happened, at very least we used to call, put it in the book, the log book in the station, put it in the book. Charlie Hall reported lower back pain after incident such and such in the address and so forth. Not that I did that a lot. I'm just using myself as an example. But at least, as Joe said, down the road, if something happens with this, it was documented that it happened at incident number 23927 at such and such structure fire, and a little bit about the circumstances surrounding it. And you know, were there repeat offenders? Yeah, I've seen a guy or two that, you know, just make out the report and with his name on it and just wait to put the date and the address in. And other guys who would you know, come to work on a broken leg because they weren't both broken. So it, you know, it ran the gamut.
All right, that seems to make sense. So now a couple of things. So does anybody have a formal, Charlie, you mentioned putting in the book, I get that. Does somebody have a formal report that has to be filed? Because I want to weave my way into, does anybody investigate these after? So tell me about what your reporting is, and then we're going to wander into, is anybody really looking at these things? Chief Cagna.
Yes. We instituted a policy a ways back where if you get anything, like Charlie said, you put it in the book, but when you get any injury, it gets reported to the chief. The chief investigates it, and usually requires you to at least go to an ER and get examined. And that was for two reasons. One, to ensure that if the firefighter did have an injury that he thought was minor, it was minor and not significant. And two, to protect the city in a sense, so that you know, guy couldn't go back and say, "Well, I got hurt at last week's fire." Well, you didn't report it. So we have a policy. If you get an injury, it has to be reported. If it's not documented, it didn't happen.
All right, fair enough. Chief Pernesti, what's that look like in your world? What's the reporting look like, or how's that handled?
We have I think it's a nationally known product. It's called Firehouse Reporting System and software. And we go right in there and put it in a casualty section or whatever, and then we'll put in the person's name and what happened to them. So it's pretty much logged for all time. And we do that now that's how we report, whether it's a or someone goes to the hospital.
All right, good. So that Firehouse software and also the National Fire Incident Reporting System, NIFRS, obviously, civilian casualty and firefighter injury goes on there as well. Charlie, did you have something beyond the logbook? Was there, in fact, a paper form or anything of that sort?
Oh, absolutely. There was actually two forms, Chief. The National Fire Incident Reporting System Firefighter Casualty Report, and also a departmental firefighter casualty report where all the specifics were spelled out, and that would be submitted through channels up to the office of the assistant chief of department, who would relay it to the chief. And depending upon the severity of the incident and or the injury, the safety committee would be summoned and would sit. And then you want to know, was it because of equipment failure? Was it because of negligence? Was it because of something that called for additional training? Or was it just something in the incident unforeseen that nobody could have avoided and it just happened? So it's investigated pretty thoroughly, particularly if it's a severe injury and going to cause perhaps a disability or at least a significant length of time lost from work.
So let me ask you this. and we said safety committee because that's another tool. Chief Pernesti talked about the investigation, and the investigation talks about this, that, and you get finger pointing, and I've seen that, Chief. So I got that. I got the T-shirt for that or whatever. But I will say this, and this could be controversial. We could get some trouble about that, but we could be controversial. I don't think we have the capability to investigate ourselves. I don't think we have the capability to investigate ourselves because even there's 4 of us sitting here on the panel and Lane just ducked out. We got an excuse for everything. I got an excuse for everything. Firefighter Smith didn't wear his air pack. He went below grade, and he hasn't been to the last 6 trainings. Nobody's ever going to say that. Nobody's ever going to say that because of a lawyer. Nobody's ever going to say that for some other catastrophic reason. So I think, Chief Pernesti, we go from both extremes. We go from everybody's an expert, mostly the people who are not at the fire, they're experts generally, and weren't sitting in the arena with the bull. But I think that there are cases where we won't do it. You know, I've had some very funny safety committee meetings, which are not privy for this panel. But I mean, I've heard, you know, I worked in a place that had a firehouse dog for one point, and the dog was a safety hazard, right? The dog, we had a safety committee about the dog because he was going to shift the truck. His collar was going to get caught on the truck and shift the truck. And I'm saying, really, that's kind of an interesting one. I didn't see that one in the National Fire Incident Reporting System. I didn't see that one. So I don't know, Chief Cagno, can we investigate ourselves?
I don't think so. Not effectively. Depending on what happened, you might be able to do a relatively thorough investigation. But if you have a significant injury on the fire ground or at an incident, I think it's best that you call in some other outside agency to do that investigation. Because like you said earlier, are you going to get everybody to be candid and honest about what happened and how it went down? And, was this guy certified to act at the capacity he was acting at? I mean, no, I would say no.
Yeah, that bingo. When there is a police involved shooting, so a police officer shoots somebody, the police department never investigates their own person because it's the law and improprieties and all that other stuff. Okay, it's the law. Well, take a little bit of that to our end. Like Chief just said, why don't we have somebody, an outside person investigate us besides NIOSH, who NIOSH is great, but they never really hit home. They dance around things. But we should have somebody come in and investigate those kind of injuries and close calls. The police do it right. And they do it for a different reason, but we could take a little bit of their example.
Charlie, you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I want to respectfully disagree with the rest of the panel. I think we do have the ability to investigate ourselves. In fact, I think we have the ability to investigate ourselves thoroughly. What we don't have the ability to do is to dictate circumstances of the investigation, results of the investigation, and how, if any, is indicated how to make change. So I think we can do the investigation, but I don't think we can go any further than that and foster the change that might be needed, unless it's a training issue. And we would keep that, okay, we see that Ladder 26 had trouble with their aerial and had trouble getting a water tower in operation, so they need some time in the drill yard. But other than that, I don't think we have the ability to foster the changes that might be needed. I do think we can investigate ourselves, but how many of those secrets are we going to keep to ourselves?
Yeah, and I think that's where I was going, Charlie. You're right. I mean, we certainly are capable. Let me restate what I said. We certainly are capable. We have the technical knowledge. But I worked with Charlie, and we came on the job together, and we've been buddies for 10 years. I'm not going to say Charlie made a mistake. If I'm on the safety committee, I'm not going to say Charlie made a mistake, because that's just the way it is. And I think we do a disservice. I got to be honest with you. We're not doing anybody any favors when we do that. And I think you're right, Charlie. I will restate it. I think we can investigate, but we're never going to come to a conclusion that's going to involve human error. If the guy's coat's ripped off, oh, we'll be suing, Globe and Morning Pride, and we're all over that. That was an equipment failure. If we could say that, ladder 2 was broke and there's no money for maintenance and the city did it, we'll be all over those conclusions. But we are never going to come to a conclusion that says Firefighter Smith did a bad thing. That's never going to happen. And I haven't seen it happen, I guess. There are some unique examples that I could cite. I don't think they're appropriate for the panel, but there are some examples that are in my mind. But I got to tell you, they're few and far between. Let me just reach out to the chat room for a second. So anything from the chat room, if you want to dive in here, if you have a question for the panel, something you want to comment on, please feel free to do so. We'll take that at any point. I do have the chat room back up and running. Chief Cagno, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I look at it as if you was to look at what happens after a plane crash, and we talk about this all the time, and it's a big thing with me. You will hear after an investigation, if it was pilot error, it was human error, it was pilot error. You will never hear that after a fire investigation. Now, I'll tell you 2 incidents that I was involved with. I fell out of an old rust bucket fire truck. I did not have seatbelts on. There was a seatbelt provided on that apparatus. It clearly wasn't in the position to be used, but I knew about that ahead of time. We did know that the locking mechanism on the door wasn't latching properly. I still got in the rig, but I fell out of that rig, or nearly fell out of that rig. Had a severe injury to my knee that caused RSD, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, extremely painful. But it wasn't thoroughly investigated. And if it was, I don't think anybody would have said, well, he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. He reported that the truck had a problem with the door mechanism, and it wasn't removed from service ahead of time. And that's on the downside of an injury that I won't talk about at this point in time. But, no, I don't think we can effectively investigate our own. I disagree. We might have the tools, we might have the knowledge and the experience, but I think that it'd be best if another agency, whether it be a neighboring department or whatever, come in and investigate it more efficiently.
Yeah, well, and again, this is a good discussion. I mean, this is the kind of discussion that happens and takes place. So let me ask you, I think I'm going to pull this out of my hat. Somebody can correct me, but I think NFPA 1500 showed up in 87 was the first edition. 1987 was the first edition. Interesting panel here tonight, Joe, because Charlie and John and I started in Rhode Island. So somewhere shortly after this happens, the state of Rhode Island makes NFPA 1500 a law. They take out a couple of sections that they didn't really like. It's a safety standard, but there's a couple of things we didn't like, so we took those out because I guess those parts didn't matter. But the point is, I'm not sure that I could tell you that right? One of the things that we cry is, I need legislation, I need this, that law didn't make us any safer. It is Pete's opinion, right? It's my shit. Any of you guys can dive in here. I think it's our behavior. I think it is our behavior. It is the way firefighters behave in personal discipline or whatever. And I think that we've got to come back to the middle. I hear the word aggressive all the time. I'm an aggressive firefighter. I'm an aggressive department. Who cares? Who cares? I mean, that's not, yeah, I understand we go in and go rescues, but we got this thing, and I think that's one of the words, and I'm not anti anybody. Charlie was talking about aggressive, and I considered myself aggressive and when I was doing it. But I think what I'm saying is that word is counterproductive to safety. That is not a safe word. Right? That's not a safe word. I mean, it's good for the residents. I think we got to take care of the residents. I'm all about that. But I think that when we say that, some of the ways we get hurt, John just raised the issue of seatbelts. You start looking, and I'm going to quote something. I think it's Bill Carey that writes for Fire Rescue or what have you, does some stuff. He's on social media. And that is, there's 64 line of duty deaths as of today, this year. And those look like this. Tossed line of duty deaths. Now we're talking injuries too. So, don't misread what I'm saying. But the deaths, only 4 of those occurred on the fire ground. We're still tossing people out of fire trucks. We're still crashing fire trucks on the way to responding. We're still crashing personally owned vehicles on the way. So the safety issue is clearly behavioral in a lot of ways. Let's just ask the panel. I will tell you, I've been doing it a long time, and I'm not sure that makes me smart. It makes me old. I don't think that I've been corrected on the fire ground. It's less than a handful of times that some safety officer, which is crap because it would have been an officer, because when I was working, there was no safety officer person. How many times have you personally been corrected on the fire ground? I'm telling you, it's less than 5. People watched me do, and I'm not saying I was a genius fireman. I'm saying people watched me do dumb stuff and nobody stopped me. Chief Gagnon? How many times were you corrected when you did a dumb thing?
Probably a handful of times, and if I was, it was a sneaker going around the corner and change whatever I was told to do. Like if somebody said, put your chin strap back on. Yeah, okay, Chief. And then as soon as I walked around the corner, it came off. But yeah, it's a behavior thing. And, I'm not proud of the way I did things for 35 years. It took me a long time to realize that I was doing it wrong, including the seatbelt issue. And I have Burton Clark to thank for that. But, 35 years I rode a rig. I fell out of a rig and still did not wear my seatbelt after. So you talk about behavior. There's a classic example. I did not have the right attitude, the right behavior, the right commitment, or the right discipline following that incident to say I'm going to wear a seatbelt. Where it was a policy, was a department policy, but my behavior or attitude and my commitment towards that policy did not change. So that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, it's a false prophet, if you will. Yeah, we have safety officers, safety committees, officer training on safety issues. But until we become more consistently consistent, these things are going to happen.
Yeah, you raised another one. I want to go to Joe and Charlie on that issue about how many times are you doing correction. It is, and I'd ask the folks in the chat room or anything, is the safety officer supposed to be the gear police? You see, I see the safety officer, whether he's certified or not certified, I see him looking at smoke conditions. I see him saying, Chief, you're trying to do too much with 4 people. You're an idiot. I see him saying this building's coming down. I see the safety officer's role far beyond the gear police. And or the other one, my favorite one, well, the safety officer's here on scene. He's a 20, 30-year veteran, senior person, been to some fires or whatever. He's not an admin person. He's a senior chief officer that's been around. And I got him counting Velcro accountability tags. That's not the same. We got this confusion, and that's the kind of thing I wanted to talk about with the panel tonight. What does it look like in your department? I can remember somebody saying, well, what's that guy doing over there? Well, he's the safety officer. I said, well, he's not even looking at the building. He's looking at a clipboard full of tags and charts and whatever the heck he's doing. He ain't making me feel any safer. So I don't know. So Joe, what do you see on the fire ground? What's the actual, implementation of the safety officer on a fire ground. Is anybody telling you you're doing something wrong? Is anybody, are you getting feedback, or is this just lip service?
Oh, I think it's lip service. You're talking the safety, the gear police or what have you. This may sound a little controversial, but you have your own, you have to have your own self-discipline on the fire ground too. Okay, make sure you're buttoned up and make sure you're wearing your chin strap and everything like that. If you then get hurt because of that, I want to say a little bit is on you, your own personal responsibility. Now, if a parapet wall comes down and I didn't establish a collapse zone, that's on me. But if you didn't totally strap up your SCBA or whatever, that 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 shows that that person doesn't know what they're doing on the fire ground, other than, or they don't know what to do on the fire ground. They think safety is that they're the safety police and they're doing all those things. Big confusion, and I think that they don't understand their role. And to answer your question, I've had it just a handful of times in my career, other than get back away from that kind of stuff. But I've never had anybody tell me, chin straps or gear or that kind of stuff.
Charlie, what do you think about this this path we're going down? So what is the role of the safety officer? Is he supposed to be the gear police, or how does he do it? What do you see the role of the person doing on the fire ground? And do you see in fires where you were at, not necessarily in command, but even fires you were at, was the safety officer correcting any adverse actions while on the scene?
This is something very near and dear to me. Later in my career, when I became a chief officer, I became the safety officer for the department. As I said previously, I was the certifying official for the job. And I had the ability, after sitting in staff meetings, I was given the ability to actually stop an operation if I saw something that was putting people in danger. And this is from the chief of the department on down. I was, the third echelon of chief officers, if you will, as a deputy. And I had the ability to overrule a decision by the chief or the assistant chief doing it in the proper way through command on the fire ground. If the only thing the safety officer is doing on the fire ground is being the gear police, then he or she is missing the big picture. And part of the safety officer's job is to do a constant and complete size up of the conditions, not only of the building, but the conditions, the condition of the firefighters that are on that fire ground. You've got to watch the people. You've got to watch the building. I don't think one safety officer at a large event is enough. And you mentioned about Velcro tags. That's a whole nother story. If all the safety officer is doing is taking care of accountability, he or she is doing it wrong. They've got to have you're going to have somebody else to do accountability for you. So when you do a PAR or whatever your department calls it, you'll have at your disposal at least to the best of your ability the last known locations of people, in case you don't get a response from somebody or two people in a company. You may have hopefully a better idea where they were or what their last working location was.
All right, makes some sense. Lane, thank you for rejoining us. I appreciate it. So we said basically that you were going to take the rest of the show and just fill in the blank. No, we didn't say that. What we were just talking about, Lane, is so the safety officers on scene, certified, trained, whatever, seasoned person, and in some small departments, they become the gear police, put your gloves on, fix your air pack, whatever. I don't think that's appropriate. I think the safety officer's role is far greater than that. And we talked about, is the safety officer interjecting on your scenes? How does it work? How does the implementation work in your world at an active incident?
I was listening to the conversation here for about the last 15 minutes on YouTube on my way back to the station. So, yeah, I think I'm up to speed on what we're talking about here. But, it's weird because sometimes you're actually the formal safety officer, but a lot of that conversation about, hey, I don't like the condition of the smoke. We've been operating a little longer. we operate with a 10-minute timer, so you got that chirping in your ear the whole time. And a lot of times the role of safety officer, is not the gear police, but it's there to provide that. If the incident commander gets a little task focused on trying to put the fire out and a little too heavily involved, then, the whole concept is that maybe he's a little less engaged, has a little less investment in the operation, and, is able to say, hey, let's pull the plug on this. Let's go defensive now rather than, fight. Generally speaking, the firefighters are always constantly, come on, chief, 5 more minutes and we'd have had it. But, occasionally as chief officers will get, roped into that as well. And, hopefully that safety officer is there to pull you back from the brink.
Yeah, well said. I think that's a good case. So I see the safety officer, and I think you're right. The safety officer is part of a command team, and in fact is to advise the incident commander in some cases. Any cases, Lane, where you've had large commercials? How do you work a safety sector if you have to assign multiple safety officers? How does that work?
Well, yeah, in a large incident like that, we're going to have callback people from home, in which case we'd have some of our training people who also fill the role of safety officers. And, other battalion chiefs would be, what we typically do under NIMS is we'd have one safety officer, and then the other ones would be assistant safety officers. And, the safety officer, whoever is the lead safety, would be working directly for the incident commander. A lot of times we won't, I don't think I've been on an incident where we've actually had one safety officer per division. And even on a big wildland, you typically don't have one safety officer per division. But, that's where on a larger wildland fire, you definitely do need an assistant safety officer, just because one guy can't see enough of the perimeter to see what's going on.
Right. You said you use a 10-minute timer. Is anybody else using a incident commanders? John, did you have a timer system that you used?
Not when I was on the job. Some guys might have did their own kind of timer, but nothing official when I was on the job. That might have changed since I left.
Chief Pernesti, is there does dispatch call you, communications call you? Is there any formal acknowledgement of a status report?
Yeah, well, it's changed now. It used to be 20 minutes now. They're supposed to contact you in 10. But because I really don't leave my command post, I have a real cheap kind of timer that's set for 10 minutes, and I just hit that button, and it just keeps me in the game, keeps me thinking 10 minutes at a time.
Charlie, did they have a timer system when you were there?
Again, my favorite 2 words, incident dependent. But if we had a working incident, fire alarm would notify us 15 minutes into the incident, 30 minutes into the incident, so forth, so on, 45 an hour. And once the incident was brought under control, command would notify fire alarm. They could discontinue the notification, but procedure was that usually 15-minute intervals. You'd get notified 15 minutes into the incident, 30 minutes into the incident, and so forth.
Yeah. I was a 15-minute. It was St. Louis years ago. I was trained. They called it a MARC, M-A-R-C. And they were a 20-minute person. Then I heard about 10-minute intervals. I didn't, quite frankly, this is going to sound silly. I didn't think I could accomplish anything in 10 minutes. I thought 10 minutes was too quick for me. I know that people are going to be running out of air somewhere around 18 or 20. If I had a 15-minute mark, I should be knowing that I'm going to see people coming out with air bottles and, am I winning? Am I losing? All of those kinds of things. So I was a 15-minute person. From the chat room, Ethan's talking about his local community there. It's similar things. There's not an actual on-duty safety officer. It's a callback chief that comes from home. So that's what's going on in his world. And I think we don't have a big volunteer representation. The problem that I wanted to talk about, and we don't have a lot of time either, but the situation in the volunteer department is, how do they pick the safety officer? Is that some person who is not allowed to go in anymore? Is that a person I can't do anything with them, so I make them the safety officer? You know, I'm concerned about that. I think a safety officer has to be a very experienced firefighter who I can, without question, I know that his judgment or her judgment is going to be spot on. And I think that sometimes in the volunteer and the on-call system, it's a career panel tonight, so it's hard for us to explain that properly. But if folks watch this show after and you want to talk about that, we do have the mechanism. Be careful about how you pick the safety officer and what your expectation is for them to do. We had a big discussion about the personal discipline issue, and we'll start to talk about that. So let's do this. Let's get to a summary. Let's start making some summary statements. So the title was, "What is safety in your department?" And so kind of just a general statement on safety. And then for the folks that have social media presence or what have you, if you want to put that out at the end, feel free to do that and I'll clean it up. Charlie, we've had a good discussion. We have point, counterpoint. We had people on both sides of the fence. What does safety mean to an individual fire department? I think it has different meanings, but what do you think it means?
I think it should mean basically the same to all departments, whether you are career, on-call, or volunteer. Safety is safety, period. The safety and well-being of the individuals involved in the firefighting effort. It has made just leaps and bounds to make our job safer. As I said earlier, it's impossible to call firefighting a safe vocation, but it can be made safer. And the advent of all these safety regulations has I can say, without hesitation, saved lives and prevented many injuries. It'll never save them all. It'll never prevent them all. Unfortunately, we don't have the mechanism to be able to do that for what we do, or in my case, did for a living. All of that said, safety has to be and should be paramount in every department. It should be probably not topic 1 or topic 1A in everybody's mind as we roll out the door.
Good. Chief Pernesti, a lot to say about this one. What do you think? And what does safety mean to your department, or to, can we blanket it? I agree with Charlie. There's a lot of principles that have to be the same, but I don't, quote Pete's opinion, I don't think it is the same as we cross the country or our friends up in Canada or what have you. I agree with Charlie. I think the principles are the same, but I'm not sure it's happening. So what's your summary, Chief?
Well, safety's not a crutch. Safety's not a Twitter type 140 character kind of debate. I think I would say safety is kind of like a discipline or character kind of word, that discipline that you apply to everything. And based on your rank, it has different types of responsibilities and meaning. So, I agree with you both that it has different meanings, but I think we tend to, as a society and a fire service, tend to paint a broad brush with that safety. And we're quick to attack and just say safety, safety, safety. And that to me, that doesn't work.
All right. And now, how do people get a hold of you if they want, Chief? How do they find you on social media or what have you? I'm
on Twitter at EFDChief3, and you can reach me email at EFDChief3@outlook.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Chief Cagno, what do you got to say? Safety in your department or in general?
In general, I think safety has to be an adopted attitude that is adopted by the entire culture of the department. It can't be one person, one battalion, one group, one officer, or one safety officer. It has to be a good cultural, behavioral attitude and a discipline and a commitment to go along with that. And more importantly, you need to have, if you have a representative, you have a permanent position in that position, he does have to be one of the best trained, maybe more experienced person in that department. Because if somebody comes up to you and say, "Hey, Chief, I think you need to pull the plug," you need to have faith in that individual, especially like Lane said, when you get the guy coming up and says, we 5 more minutes and we would have had it. Yeah, what we would have had? The fire under control or a funeral.
Right. Right. John, how do folks, you do this program called Lead It and other stuff. How do people get a hold of you if they want you?
They can get a hold of me on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, jcagno.com, on my website, or they can email me at jcag2334@aol.com. All
right. Good. Good. Lane, what do you got? What is this safety? Is it just a buzzword? Is it how does it really work in the real world?
Well, and everybody's alluded to it, talking about culture, and that really you can't have one safety officer isn't there to be the gear police. That really is everybody being professional, being disciplined. Walking around with your coat unbuttoned, it looks cool in the movies and stuff, but that's just not, a professional shows up with all their gear on properly, wearing your seatbelt. That's just, most safety shortfalls in terms of gear and things like that are just guys being lazy. And so you got to be professional, show up dressed to do your job. We're never going to eliminate all sources of injuries and what have you. Firefighting is going to remain to be dangerous, but having all your gear on, having your waist belt done up and your hood on, doesn't make you less of an aggressive firefighter. You may not look as cool in the pictures in the newspaper, but safety has become part of the culture now. Very rare have I seen a guy about not having his gear on time. Oh, and I'm on Twitter, LDub at Suncoast Chief. Jump on there, follow me on all my nonsensical ravings on all things fire service related.
Yeah, and it's LDub is EL, right?
ELDUB. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
It's Suncoast Chief. Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah, it's not the letter L. And if anybody that's listening, watching this, it is some of the best entertainment with 140 characters you've ever had in your life. There's a lot of good stuff. Lane puts out a lot of good stuff. So I'll put the ribbons on it. And I think the ribbons in this case are my opinion. We continue to do some things, and I think that we make excuses. I think a lot of us do. I think a lot of us do. I'm certainly not without sin. We make excuses. We make excuses for ourselves. We make excuses for other firefighters. We make excuses for our department a lot of times. And I think that, somebody told me, if you learn something, it's an observable behavioral change. You behave differently once you learn something. And I'm not so sure that we are learning things, or is there what, Lane just kind of said something in passing. I'm doing this because it's cool. It's cool. And I just have to tell you, if you have gone to a firefighter's funeral and you have been in a position in the formation or the honor guard, and you have watched the firefighter hand the flag to the widow or the helmet to the little child, I don't know why you wouldn't behave differently so that didn't have to happen again. I consider myself, I have a certain amount of courage. I've lived some things in my life, courage. I've done some stupid things on the job, courage. But I have to tell you something. I look at that image of the little child holding the helmet, or I look at that image of the wife holding a flag, and I would do anything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. And if I got to tell John he's acting like an idiot, whether it's at the fire or before the fire or after the fire, then I'm going to do that, because I don't want any little kid holding his father's helmet that his father doesn't hand him. See, that's the rule. If a little child's going to hold a fire helmet, it's got to be his dad or his mom that handed him that helmet. Can't be some stranger on his knees at a funeral. So I think when we think about the consequences of our actions, I think we might want to change our behavior, and it's not as cool. Because, see, I don't think that's cool at all. I don't think that's cool at all. So safety means different things in different agencies based on your resources, based on a lot of things. I think there are some common principles that are there, but I think that safety is a word. It's got to be an action word. It's got to, you got to behave like you want to go home. You have to behave like you want to go home. And I'm not saying disregard the citizens in the building. That's not where I am. But I'm thinking that we gotta do a better job. And I think that personal discipline has a lot to do with that. All right. We are going to have a show next week. I know it's Columbus Day weekend. We've decided we're going to have a show. So we will see you here next Sunday at 8 p.m. And thanks for watching the show.